judge temporarily blocks Trump plan to stop Harvard enrolling foreign students. Then you see, White House blasts judge's liberal agenda. Whoa, I mean, that's quite a headline clash right there.
It really is. Sets the scene immediately, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Welcome, everyone, to The Deep Dive. Today, we're getting into a really fast-moving legal and political fight that flared up recently. It's between the Trump administration and Harvard University, and it zeroed right in on international students.
Yeah, and we've gathered sources covering, the specific government action, Harvard's pretty forceful comeback, a really quick court decision, and maybe most importantly, what this all actually meant for the thousands of students who were suddenly, caught in the crossfire.
Exactly. So our goal here is to unpack this whole thing. We want to understand the arguments from both sides, based on what our sources say, see how things escalated so quickly, and look at the immediate impact on Harvard and its international student community. Okay, let's unpack this. So what exactly kicked this whole thing off, according to the sources we've got?
Well, the main event, it seems, happened on a Thursday. The Trump administration took this pretty direct action against Harvard. They moved to basically revoke the university's access to the Student and Exchange Visitor Program database, SEV.
SEVP.
Yeah.
Right. And just so everyone's clear, that's the government system that it manages foreign students studying in the U.S. Yeah. So cutting off access is, it's serious.
Oh, absolutely. It's like unplugging Harvard from the very system international students need to legally keep their visas. It's fundamental infrastructure for enrolling foreign students.
And the administration, they weren't shy about why they did it. What were the reasons they gave, based on what we're seeing?
Well, the main claims were that Harvard hadn't done enough to fight antisemitism on its campus, and also that it hadn't sufficiently changed its hiring and admissions practices.
And there was a broader angle, too, wasn't there? Something about elite universities needing to be, tougher on pro-Palestinian activists and also discriminate less against conservative views.
That's exactly right. Our sources even quote President Trump on this. He apparently said something like, Harvard is going to have to change its ways. And he hinted that other universities could face similar actions, too. Okay,
so it wasn't just framed as a unique Harvard problem.
No, it definitely seemed positioned as part of a wider strategy targeting academic institutions.
Right. But Harvard didn't just sit back, did they? What was their move, and how fast did it happen?
Incredibly fast. The sources say the very next day, Friday, they went straight to court, filed a lawsuit against the administration.
And the language they used, reading President Alan Garber's letter and the suit itself, pretty strong stuff. What were the key arguments?
Oh, yeah, very strong. They called the administration's decision a blatant violation of the law and free speech rights. They labeled it unlawful and unwarranted.
And Garber really framed it as retaliation, didn't he? Like payback, because Harvard wouldn't just, quote, surrender our academic independence.
Right.
Basically refusing to let the government dictate curriculum, faculty, students.
Exactly. That was the core argument. And they really highlighted the potential damage, too, arguing the move sought to, quote, erase a quarter of Harvard's student body. Students, they stressed, contribute a lot to the university.
I was struck by how they approached the legal fight, getting those high-profile Republican lawyers involved, including someone who advised the Trump Organization, and Robert Hur. It really shows they were gearing up for a serious battle, right?
They absolutely were pulling out all the stops, it seems, and the legal system's response, almost immediate.
Seriously, later that same Friday, U.S. District Judge Allison Burroughs steps in and issues a temporary restraining order, a TRO.
Yeah, so less than 24 hours after the administration's announcement, a federal judge basically hit the pause button on revoking Harvard's SEVP access. It shows the courts can move surprisingly fast sometimes.
They really can. But, okay, that wasn't the end of it. The White House response to the judge. What did our sources say about that?
The reaction described is, it's pretty remarkable. The Deputy Press Secretary, Abigail Jackson, put out a statement, and it didn't just defend the administration's actions, it went directly after Harvard and the judge.
And she didn't hold back, did she? I remember reading, she blamed Harvard, saying something like, if only Harvard cared this much about ending the scourge of anti-American, anti-Semitic, pro-terrorist agitators, basically saying this wouldn't have happened otherwise, and called the lawsuit frivolous.
Exactly. And then, crucially, she took aim right at the judge, accusing her of having a liberal agenda. And she stated flat out that Unelected judges have no right to stop the Trump administration from exercising their rightful control over immigration policy and national security policy.
Wow. Attacking the judge directly like that? I mean, that's definitely turning up the heat politically.
Yeah.
But let's shift from the legal back and forth. What were the real immediate consequences of all this? Who felt it the most?
Right. That's where it becomes much more personal, much more human. This whole action directly threatened around 6,800 international students at Harvard.
6,800. That's a huge number.
It really is. It's over 27%, more than a quarter of their entire student body. And the sources point out, they come from all over China, Canada, India, South Korea, the UK are big ones. They even mention Princess Elizabeth of Belgium, the heir to the throne, is one of those students.
And the student perspectives in the sources, they're just incredibly powerful, aren't they? You hear from people like Leo Ackerman. He was on a Zoom call literally living his dream of studying here, and then gets this news. He talked about the sadness, feeling that dream might be yanked away, but still hoping because Harvard fought back.
Yeah, and Kat Shee, a second-year STEM student, she just expressed pure shock at how suddenly it all happened.
And those anonymous British students, speaking to the BBC, you can totally understand why they'd be worried about immigration, talking about getting into Harvard being their absolute dream, working so hard for it. They kind of acknowledged campus issues, but felt things were being dealt with. The overwhelming feeling, just shock, anger, and this sense of being, quote, used as pawns in a game.
That pawns in a game line. Yeah, that really lands hard. And the reason it felt so immediately threatening is because of that SEVP system we talked about. Being logged in there is essential for their student visas. If Harvard gets cut off, suddenly these students could be violating their visas. They could face deportation. It's that serious.
And beyond the human cost, which is obviously huge, there's a big financial piece to this too, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Losing that many international students would be a major, major financial hit. Our sources point out that international students, generally, they don't qualify for U.S. federal aid or loans. And experts cited say they're, much more likely to be paying the full sticker price, the full tuition.
Which, in effect, helps pay for financial aid for American students, right? It's part of the funding model.
Exactly. That's the dynamic. And when you look at the numbers mentioned, undergrad tuition alone is almost $60,000, and the total cost, room, board, fees, easily tops $100,000 a year before aid. Removing over a quarter of the student body, many paying close to that full amount, that's a massive chunk of revenue gone.
So, connecting the dots here.
Yeah.
Was this move against Harvard's SEVP access just out of the blue? Or do the sources suggest it fits into a bigger picture?
The sources definitely paint it as part of a pattern. They make it clear the Trump administration had targeted Harvard and other similar universities before this incident.
Like what kind of things?
Well, previous actions mentioned include freezing some $2.2 billion in federal funding that actually triggered an earlier lawsuit from Harvard. And there were even threats to take away the university's tax-exempt status.
And what's interesting reading through this is that it wasn't just Harvard. Right? The administration, according to these sources, has launched investigations into dozens of universities and apparently run concessions from some others. Columbia University is mentioned as an example.
Right. And, the sources do acknowledge that Harvard has actually made some concessions in the past. They give an example about dismissing leaders at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies related to issues about representing Israeli perspectives. But this latest action, going after the very mechanism allowing international students to even be there, it seems like a pretty significant escalation in the kind of pressure being applied.
So it sounds like while universities are trying to handle these really complex campus issues, free speech, climate, all that, they're also simultaneously pushing back against what they see as the government stepping way over the line into their basic operations and academic freedom.
It really highlights that fundamental tension, doesn't it? Where's the line between the government addressing, legitimate concerns on campus versus interventions that universities feel undermine their independence?
So wrapping this up, what does it all mean? We saw this incredibly fast chain of events. The administration acts, targets thousands of students. Harvard sues basically overnight, and a judge puts a temporary stop to it all within about 24 hours.
Yeah, the stakes, as the sources lay them out, were just incredibly high. You had Harvard's ability to operate normally, the immediate future of nearly 7,000 students thrown into doubt, this ongoing clash over academic independence versus government policy, and, the administration's clear focus on pressuring universities.
The judge's order definitely provided some breathing room, pausing the immediate threat. But the core conflict, the administration's stated issues with Harvard, those clearly aren't resolved by a temporary order.
No, not at all. And it leaves you thinking, doesn't it? What does that rapid legal challenge and the judge's quick intervention really tell us about the balance of power between the White House, universities, and the courts when these fights break out? And maybe just as importantly, what does this whole episode reveal about just how vulnerable international students can find themselves when they get caught in the middle of these bigger political and institutional battles?
Definitely a lot to think about there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.